In this episode of our photography review show, we're gonna review landscape, wildlife, and mixed team photographers. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you had a great week, and I hope you're ready for more photography reviews. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. I'm also a founder and creator here at Clever Photographer, and for the past 7 or 8 months, I've been reviewing photos here on this channel. Now it's been lots of fun, and we received thousands of images from hundreds of photographers. Now in today's show we have a lot of beautiful pictures to go through. However, just as a reminder, if you want to join us for this photography review show, if you want to have your pictures to be reviewed, all you need to do is to join our membership Clever Photographer Plus. If you want to do that or learn more about it, make sure you head to our website cleverphotographer.com and search for membership there. For a little fee, you get a themed photography bundle every month, including overlays, skies, textures, presets, brushes, and everything you can imagine when it comes to photography. Also included with that is access to this photography review show, and I think it's super worth it. So now that is out of the way, let's jump into the reviewing. And here we are in Lightroom CC, where we're gonna be looking at our photographers. Starting right away with the landscape photographer Greg, looking at 2 of his images of this beautiful steam train. So let's start by this one, going into the edit, so we can have a look at the camera details. So looking at this first image, Nikon D200, the lens 70 to 200 millimeters, and from the camera setting ISO 100, 70 millimeters, f3.5, 1/320th of a second. So ISO 100 spot on, 70 millimeters, nice, and zoom in. f3.5 seems to be quite low for this picture. I'm not 100% sure what was the thought behind. Let's zoom in and see how the sharpness is. It's quite decent all the way through. Obviously you get a little bit of soft blur at the back, which works very nice, and I'm assuming you were trying to keep the shutter speed high to make sure that everything is nice and sharp and that you maybe get some details in a smoke right here. So other than that, I think I quite like the sharpness. I think maybe just the bit at the front could get a little bit of extra sharpening. If I can suggest you a system, that is a Topaz Sharpen AI, and that would fix this really easily. It's a little bit more expensive, somewhere around $80-90, but it's definitely worth it for parts like this where maybe the slider in Lightroom or Photoshop is not doing their job anymore. Now moving on this one and talking about the technical informations, once again very pretty train. So this was actually captured with a drone, so this is a DJI drone, and from the camera setting ISO 160, 8.8 millimeter, f2.8, and 1/320th of a second. Now the setting for drone is a little bit different than for your usual DSLR or mirrorless camera. However, still, let's zoom in and see what we can see here. Now the sharpness is very decent. I'm very happy about that. The color is quite good too. There is still some steam coming from the thing. The capture is quite nice. Lovely details in the sky. The colors are a little bit washed out, but altogether I think technically both of the images are very well done. Now moving on to the composition and starting with this one, I really like this one. I just wish there was a little bit more space here so we could kind of see a little bit more. Also, when you have these kind of moving objects, you also always want to give them a little bit of active space to go into, but then I completely understand with the length of the train, it's not always possible to frame it all together. However, I think other than that, it works very nicely. I really think that it kind of gives a very nice flow, the train. Everything is nice and balanced. Yeah, I really like it. I don't think there is a big deal. The only thing is the space in front of the train. Now moving into this one is very good. I think this works very well. It's quite tight crop, and I would hope it would be part of some kind of collection when there is maybe more shots of the train, maybe a little wider and so on. However, like this, I think it works. Once again, the details are very well done here. The depth as well works very nicely, and I think it's just very simple composition with a clear message and clear main element. Moving into the post-processing, so two little bit different images, probably mostly going into the fact that this one was captured with your usual camera and this one with Mavic or drone. So where here the colors are a little bit more washed out, here I think the picture is a little bit over saturated. So what I would do, I would jump into my edit module here, and I would go for the color and probably bring down the overall saturation just a little bit and maybe just push the vibrance. So that way I'm kind of tuning down all the colors together and just pushing a little bit the ones which are tuned down. The next thing I would do, I would go into the color mixer and make sure that I'm on saturation, and I would bring down the greens a little bit, maybe green and yellow, just to kind of get reduce of the overall green brightness. Also, what you can do is to go into the hue, and I do that quite often when I have a lots of green. I sometimes push the green more towards the yellow. I think that yellow is a little bit more natural, and I think in this case it would work quite nicely. Now the next thing, as always, we can jump into the effect and maybe apply a little vignette, and then we can use our masking tool with the brush with the extra exposure and maybe add a little bit more attention towards the train itself. We could create another mask, add linear gradient, and right here from the bottom just close the image even further by adding minus exposure. So this is quite cool, quite happy with it. Then moving into this image, actually I like this one a little bit more. I think it's because of the colors. Also the composition is quite epic. I think in overall it's quite nicely edited. I don't have much to add here, maybe just a little bit of extra exposure, add a touch of contrast, and going into the color here I would probably push the saturation with the vibrance a little bit more. Then of course, as always, we can close it up a little bit with the extra vignette, and we can add extra attention by using the brush and extra exposure on it. So something like this, and you get two epic images. Greg, thank you so much for sharing your images with you. You know, I'm a big fan of train photography, and it's always great to see your photos. Moving into the next photographer, Laurie. Laurie, we have two images here. So let's go for it. Let's have a look at the camera details if we have them. And starting with this one, let's see, is there any, it's a shame there is no text to tell us what is it we are looking at. It looks a little bit like a mushroom. I know it's not a mushroom, but the shape looks a little bit like a mushroom. And I hope maybe you can send me a message or you can leave us in a comment what is it we actually looking at. Now from the camera settings, we have a Canon 5D Mark IV with the lens 70-300, and from the camera setting itself, ISO 100, 70mm, f5.6, 1/125th of a second. So ISO 100 spot on, means no noise, which we always happy for. The sharpness is very good as well. f5.6, yeah, there is not much elements behind it which could give us any extra depth. 1/125th of a second, leave us some texture in the sky. Obviously the light is a little bit harsher, but I'm more kind of puzzled by what is it I'm looking at. So all in all, technically I think it's quite well set. Maybe not the most maybe not the greatest light on the world, but still it's very, very nice. Now moving into this one, also not explanation. What I really like here when we're going to talk about the composition is to including the guy here, because that gives us really a good sense of scale and how big the rocks are. I think that was very smart. Again, looking at the camera, Canon 5D Mark IV with the, is it the same lens? Let me see. Same lens, and from the camera setting, ISO 100, so sticking to the right number, 135mm, so nice and zoom in, f8, making sure that everything is nice and sharp, and then 1/125th of a second to make sure that we have details in the shadows as well as highlights. Now, talking about composition on this one, what, again, I'm looking at it, and first I'm looking at the person, but then you need to turn it around and think about the viewer. The first thing that the viewer gets attracted by the brightest and whitest part of the image. So there is obviously lots of that there. And then they go for the contrast, and the contrast is with the gentleman waving. So I think that works quite nicely. Would I probably crop it even a little bit further? I would, because I think this part isn't as interesting as the rest of it, so I would probably go for something like this. Also, just give a little bit more space around the person and make him a little bit bigger in overall, just to make it all kind of work nicely together. Other than that, I think it's quite nice. Yeah, there's lots of texture, lots of contrast, lots of different colors. I like that. Once again, I like the fact that you thought about the scale. I think that works very well as well. So all in all, very well done, Laurie. Now moving on this one, and a composition, I'm just not 100% sure what it is. As a composition, there's a clear message. It has a focal point, which is obviously this rock, and I think that works. Other than that, yeah, that's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's on your third as well. There is plenty of space around it. So all in all, quite good. Now, when it comes to post-processing, I don't really have to add anything to this. I mean, we can add, maybe if we would want to, in effects, a little vignette. Then we could of course do maybe some additional dodge and burn by using the brush, so we could add a little bit of extra exposure on some of these parts, just making it all stand out a little bit more. And then we can add another brush with a minus exposure and create some additional contrast. So there you have it. This is what we could do to it. Now, coming to this and talking about post-processing, let's have a look at the white balance for you and see where we are. And you are actually spot on, so there is no issue there. I don't know, I wouldn't really add much to it. I think it's very, very nice. The exposure, let's see, is correct. The whites, blacks, the shadows, that is full of details. The texture is standing out very nicely. I wouldn't sharpen it anymore. I wouldn't add any additional texture to it. So all in all, Laurie, thank you so much for sharing your images. It was lovely to look at them. I can't wait to find out what is it we are looking at on this one. Moving to the next photographer, we have Evgeniy. Evgeniy, we have two images from you, and it wouldn't be a photo from you if there wouldn't be a squirrel. So this is very, very nice. And then we have this lovely capture of the blue flower. So let's go for it. Let's have a look at the camera settings. So again, let's see, we using the Pentax K100D, and from the camera settings on this one, ISO 200, 135 millimeters, and 1/125th second on the shutter speed. Now, there is a slight blur on this one. There's a lots of details on this one. The light is a little bit harsh again, coming from this side. So that is something to maybe look out for. Even a big sheet of white paper, which you could somehow position behind it or above it, which would soften the light a little bit, I think would be really, really helpful, and something to maybe think of for the future. Other than that, nicely done. I quite like the soft background. I think that works very well. With the green background, it creates quite nice contrast, and I think that works very well too. Moving on this one, the framing is very good with the animal being on the third. I think that works well. When it comes to the setting of your camera, ISO 200, 300 millimeters, 1/250th of a second works great. Great sharpness on the animal again. I think that works very, very well. We get tiny bit of noise, so nothing crazy. So in overall, technically very well handled. The light is quite pleasing here as well. It's kind of warm, so I'm assuming this is maybe later on in the day, and I think that works quite nicely. Even though we still get the shadows here, it's nice. The only thing I could wish here is that you would have a different background, just to kind of make the contrast of the animal a little bit stronger, but that's just a wish rather than a mistake. Now, talking about composition, once again, it's very nicely done, very nicely hidden. I talked about the contrast with the background already. Obviously, the animal is on the move with the tree I think together it's a lovely idea. I can't say that it's the best picture of a squirrel I've seen from you. I think I saw, when it comes to composition, I saw some even more interesting captures, but it's still very, very nice. Now in this one, when it comes to composition, it's a shame that this one is a little bit soft and also a little bit noisy. You can see it on these parts because obviously you have both of them at a very kind of same distance from the camera, so I would expect both of them being sharp and everything else then gradually becoming soft, where you have this one kind of sharp and this one little soft. So I think somehow you need to find a way how you can balance both of them, and it's maybe a question of adjusting your f-stop. So maybe you just need to go back and forwards with your f-stop and see which one will make sure that both of the flowers would be in focus. Other than that, it's nicely done. It's nicely framed, nicely cropped. All in all, very, very good. Moving on the post-processing. Now, one thing I want to check is a white balance on this one. So let's have a look going into the color and see the white balance. And you see this is much more natural than the all blue. I think the blue is really, really strong. Now, I wouldn't maybe go that far, but at least something like this, I think, makes it a little bit more natural and special. So this is what I would go for on the white balance. The vignette is already here, so that's not a problem. The light creates its own dodge and burn effect, so that's very nicely done too. So altogether, this is where I would leave it. Now, talking about this one, what would I do here? Obviously, the light is coming from here, hitting the animal from the back. What we could do here, I would make it a little bit brighter, I think. Not that crazily, but somewhere around 20, just to make sure. Obviously, a little vignette always helps, and then probably just using a brush to add a little bit of dodge and burn and actually improving the animal itself and adding more attention to it. So where are we? Brush and adding exposure, and now we can just paint over her head and maybe a tail and the back and so on, and we could create another one with minus exposure and just add it like this. So this is where I would leave it, Evgeniy. Lovely capture, both of them. This one, it's just the sharpness I would be looking for to see how I can handle it better. This one, lovely, lovely capture. So well done for sharing it with us. Okay, so the next photographer we're going to be looking at is called Rigoberto. Now, Rigoberto, we have two images here, and I'm a big fan of long exposure and the kind of light painting, and it looks very, very cool. So let's have a look at it. Moving on to the edits and looking at the camera settings. Now, sadly, we can't see, we can see it on this one. So on this one, not necessarily. It's a Nikon D3200 with the ISO 200, and it's a lots of kind of painting around. Now let's zoom in and see. There is a touch of noise, but it's not crazy for the type of photography you're using. So very good here. And then looking at this one with the guitar and the painting around, which is very artistic. We're looking at Nikon D40 with the lens 18 to 55 millimeters, and your camera setting goes as ISO 200, 19 millimeters, f11, 30-second long exposure. Wow, that's a long time. So I wonder what is it you use to create this effect. Maybe you can share it with us in a comment. I would love to learn that. Let's just talk about it. Let's just zoom in and see at least 100%. The noise is quite well managed, so I'm happy about that. The lovely sharpness on the actual subject, I think, work very well too. And in overall, it creates very, very nice effects. So well done. I think the camera settings is spot on, give you the 30-second, and you're able to create effect like this. So well done. Now, when it comes to composition, I really like this one, also because I can kind of connect and recognize the subject. So I think that is a little bit easier. Only thing I would do, I would probably frame it a little bit less on the top to create some kind of balance in the composition. And then moving on this one and talking about composition, I like it. However, I think between two of them, I prefer this one because on this one is very abstract, and I'm trying to, I'm finding difficult to get what is it I'm looking at. Obviously, there's some repeating elements, and I'm sure it's a lot of work, but I'm just not the greatest person to appreciate it. Still, as a technical part goes, it's very well done. I like how you manage to keep everything together, so well done there. Now, when it comes to post-processing, I can't really add anything. I think the white balance is good. I think the saturation is just on the point. Obviously, with the shadows and highlights, this is a little bit more trickier. There are some parts which are still maybe a bit too bright. When I look at the rest of the image, how everything is dark, I would probably try to darken this as well. You could do that simply by using brush and some minus exposure, I think, you know, just to kind of create and bring everything same. Now, this is just very quick edit. You can take your time to do it, but just to balance everything and the overall look, that's what I would do there. Now, talking about this one, not much I can add again. I really like the result, and I would love to learn more about it. So if you can share with us in a comment, what is it we are looking at, so we can maybe help you even further. Either way, Rigoberto, thank you so much for sharing your images with us. It was a pleasure to tell you what I think about it. Well done for the effort, and hope to see more of your images soon. Which brings us to photographer number 5, Zdenek. Zdenek, we have a, by the way, happy birthday, Zdenek. I think a few days back that was your birthday, so I hope you had a great time, and I hope you all staying safe. So looking at your images, we have this one right here, lovely zebras running in desert or in the field, and this one, obviously the zebras and other animals coming to this piece of water with lots happening behind them. So as a combination, actually very nice example of storytelling, Zdenek. I quite like that. I wonder if it's from the same location. So let's jump into the camera details, and starting with this one, we are looking at Canon 600D with the lens 55 to 250 millimeters, and as the camera setting goes, it's ISO 131 millimeters, so really nice punched in, f7.1, giving you very decent depth here, and 1/400 of a second, making sure that everything is nice and sharp. So well done there. Now moving on this image, again, the camera Canon 600D, 55 to 250 millimeters, and from the settings, ISO 100, 84 millimeters, f8, 1/400 of a second. So, looking at it like this, f8, how is the sharpness? Let's zoom in and let's have a look. It's actually very decent for the size of the image and also for the depth. Now you're getting a little bit of softness at this part of the image. I wonder what is it caused by. I'm looking at the details. The ISO is right. The f-stop is right. Maybe the camera was struggling with the light or something. I'm not sure. However, I quite like it. I like the depth. I like the kind of, you have your foreground and then you have the field as a middle ground and then the mountains at the background. I think that works very nicely. So as a composition goes, I really like that. Now, I think I mentioned to you a few times before, I always prefer when there is more sky, and if there isn't a space for sky, I quite often just like to crop it off. I think that just makes sense for me personally. However, it's there. Not a big deal. The rest of it, great. The only thing I would do, I would probably just, it just seems that this is kind of falling down a little bit, but maybe that's how it is. Maybe the platform is a little bit on a different angle, so that's fine. And talking about this one, when it comes to composition, I like both of them. I like the sharpness, I like the depth, I like the contrast of the animals with the background. However, I just wish there was more space in front of them. Something that's called active space, and I think that would improve this picture hugely if the crop would be either a little bit bigger or there would have been more space in front of it. So that would be the only things I would be looking for. The rest is very, very good. Which brings us to the post-processing. And on this one, let's jump to it. Let's see how we're doing with the white balance here. And it just makes it cooler. So that doesn't make sense really, right? So something like this. And I wonder, the colors are just a little bit washed out. I think it's a shame, you know, when you look at it, it's difficult to find any kind of main color to grasp in. Can we increase the saturation? Not really, no, that doesn't help. Obviously, we could turn it to black and white. That would be one option. And I think it always works with zebras. That would be one option. We could add some contrast. We could also make the whole picture just washed out a little bit with little fade. Then we can set this back and see what do we want to do. Maybe something like this. Yeah, something like this to start with, I think would be right. Definitely additional vignette to bring more attention on the animal, and probably leave it there. Where on this one, I would make the whole picture a little bit darker, and then not that much, maybe just a little bit, and then I would go for it and edit it a little bit on an Ansel Adams style. So the Ansel Adams basically use a whole parts of the image with different brightness, and that's what I would do. I would use the brush with maybe minus exposure and just find the parts which are a little bit darker, which in our case are here and here, and then another brush and add some exposure to this part and this part, and then maybe another brush and add some exposure in this part and this part, still controlling what we're seeing here. And then we could add another brush and do some minus exposure and maybe create some contrast by adding some minus exposure to this, and finally adding another brush and really just highlighting this area right here. So that's about it. That's what I would do. Maybe make the overall picture a little bit brighter. Maybe I went a bit overboard. Let's have a look if we can help to it with the little curve here, and something like this would work very nicely. So I really love this picture. I think that's a great composition, great capture. The only thing I would be looking at is seeing why you're getting this kind of really soft effect. On this one, very nice as well. Washed out colors, which I don't know if it's the time of the day or why you're getting them. And also a little bit of extra space in front of them would definitely help. Either way, thank you very much, Zdenek. You take care, stay safe, and send us more pictures next week. Which brings us to the wildlife photographers, Donna, John, and Ken. Starting with Donna. Wow, what a capture. Look at this beautiful bird. And this one as well. Oof. And now, which one do I like the more? Tricky, tricky, tricky. I like this one. I think I like this one a lot. And maybe because recently I saw lots of captures with them moving the wings, and this one is it's kind of almost still hold, like it's really frozen. I quite like that. I like them both. Anyway, starting with this one, let's have a look at it. Let's talk about the camera setting. On this one, Nikon D850 camera, the lens is 70 to 200 millimeters. And looking at the camera settings, we are on ISO 640, 200 millimeters, f2.8, so all the way down, and 1/5000th of a second. Donna, I would love to know, do you really have to go as fast? Because I never photographed this bird, so I would love to know if you could let me know what's the ideal speed. Is it really has to be 1/5000th of a second? Because I would love to know. Now looking at it, I love the sharpness on the bird. I love the sharpness on the flower in front, and the contrast and the blur at the back works really, really well as well. So altogether, technically very well done. Obviously we get tiny bit of noise, but you already taken care of it, so I think altogether really very well done. Where on this one, it seems like the details are even better on this one. Now I just want to compare the settings. The camera setting is exactly the same. That's very interesting. Am I right? Yes. The ISO 640, 200 millimeters, f2.8, 1/5000th of a second. So exactly the same setting. I tell you also why I like this image a little bit more. It's because this image has, the background is still a little bit busy, where on this one, it's much more simpler. So it really isolate the image, isolate the main subject, so we don't worry about what's happening behind, and we can fully focus on the actual bird and the flower. So I think that works extremely well here. Well done. And the level of detail specifically here, looking at it like this, is superb. Talking about composition, they are both great. I can't say anything here. Obviously, when we do the thirds here, the bird on this third, I think works very well. If you would want to, you could push it a little bit up, but it's all the same together. And on this one, Again, he's on a third here. The main subject is on a third. Everything is in frame very nicely. I just think it's very, very good. The depth is great here. All together, just very well done. Post-processing. I'm not going to be able to help you much, Donna, this week because I think it's just very well done. I love it. Maybe when it comes to white balance on this one, let's check it out, what it gives us. Definitely a little more green. I think there's plenty. And I would definitely not add any cool. I think if anything, I would actually add a warmth and add touch of the magenta simply because I just see some greens in the actual flower here. That's about it. Now on this one, similarly, let's just check what it suggests. Now it's all over the place. So a little bit of extra warm, little bit of extra magenta. There's already a really nice vignette around it. The dodge and burn and contrast works very well here. I love the details with the spider web being here. All in all, Donna, thank you so much for sharing the image with us. It was brilliant. I love them. Should be really proud of. And if you can let me know about the shutter speed, I would love to learn a little bit about it. Moving on, John. John, we have two birds here today. John Lister. We have this beautiful parrot, and then we have this bird having a lunch, probably in a little water reservoir. So let's talk about it. Starting with this one, looking at the camera settings. We have a Nikon D7100 with a lens 100 to 400 millimeters, and from the camera settings, ISO 1600, 400 millimeters, so really all the way in, f7.1 and 1/640th of a second. Now, I love the level of the details. I think that's brilliant. 400 millimeters, obviously really zoomed in. f7.1, we can't see nothing behind him. So I just wonder if we would open the shadows, can we actually see what was behind? It's just some green. So I think the black works very well here, John. I think that's a good option. And other than that, yeah, I think the rest is fine. The sharpness is perfect. The colors are great. The separation with the background, obviously the color contrast works very well. All in all, very well done. Now moving on this one, the first thing I really like here is the contrast of the colors. I think that's so important and probably one of the most difficult things when it comes to wildlife photography. So many times I see beautiful birds, beautiful animals, deers, foxes, you name it. But obviously by nature, they quite often located in an environment where they blend with the background. However, in this case, it's not the case. It's very, very nice contrast and I really like it. Also, the reflection is very, very cool. Now, I wish there was a little bit more space here, but all in all, very well done. Now, talking about the settings here, Nikon D7100. Let me just have a look. It's the same camera, same lens. And from the camera settings, we have the ISO 400, 400 millimeters again. So really zoom in. 7.1 f-stop and 1/1000 second on the shutter speed. So the sharpness is great. Really happy with it. It seems like it's tilting a little bit. That's about it. The blur at the back works very well as well. The movement is good. The light is good. I think it's all good. Talking about composition, I think it's tilting, as I mentioned earlier. I think just a little bit like this, I think would help. Then I would probably just position him in a center as it's the main subject here. And that's about it. Again, the depth great. And most importantly, the contrast is perfect here. Now with this guy, I don't know. Obviously, ideally, you would be on something like this because that would be more interesting. However, I think this works very well here. There is lots of empty space above him, which we could get reduced or not to make it a little bit more cinematic. You could do something like this. But I think the subject is clear. The sharpness is great here. The contrast is great as well. The depth, obviously, is ultimately on with the dark background. So all in all, very well done. Moving on to post-processing on this one, nothing to add. Bright, saturated, excellent, great. On this one, the water is really green, which I think it's a little bit of a shame. And I wonder if in color and color mixer, turning it to saturation, we could get reduce of a little bit of the green, just a tiny bit. And maybe in the hue, can we do something about it or not really? We would make it just more, we would make it more muddy, which we don't want to do. So we leave it the way it is. Just one more time, have a look if we can help to it with the saturation. Just maybe something a little bit like this. Let's see it before and after, just to, maybe not that much, maybe something like this, just to kind of reduce some of the green and again bring more attention towards the bird. Now when it comes to effects, I would just add extra vignette, maybe with the brush add a little bit more attention with extra exposure towards the bird, and leave it from there. So that's about it, John. Thank you very much for sharing the pictures. Great results. Lovely, lovely captures. This one, brilliant. Love the contrast. This one as well. Love the level of details. And that brings us to the final photographer of the week. We have a Ken here. And Ken, we have two images to look at. Let's just open our settings here. Again, looking at the camera settings, and we have this very interesting bird here. Lovely, lovely capture. And this one right here as well. So both of them with the same camera, Nikon Coolpix P1000. And looking at the camera settings, starting with this one, ISO 108A, 359mm, f6.3, 1/500 second. Now, I don't know if it's the zoom or something, but it seems a little bit soft, a little bit of out of focus, and it also seems very noisy, Ken. Even though it's lovely capture, I love the bird, I love the shape, I love the contrast as well. It's just not sharp the way I would hope it would be. And when I zoom in, the level of noise is also quite high. I just wonder how we could fix that. Maybe it's the camera, who knows. However, technically, the sharpness and the noise would be the two things I would be looking at here. Now, talking about this one, again, lovely contrast, great capture with the bird eating the fish. I think that's brilliant. When it comes to camera settings, we were on ISO 280, 306mm, f6.3, and 1/500 of a second. So the camera setting is good. However, again, there is a bit of a softness. Now let's have a look at the size of the image. 2.58 megabytes. I wonder if you could maybe send me for the future bigger size images, just to see if it's just my screen or if the images need a little bit of extra sharpening. Now, talking about composition though, I really like this. Now, I wish there would have been a little bit more of the bird. However, obviously catching him in this kind of when he's eating, I think is great. I would probably crop it a little bit tighter. It's all about the bird eating the fish. You don't need the top of it, and probably go for something like this. Now on this one, the composition is great because of the contrast. I think the light is quite decent as well. What is not concerned about, what is to think about, is the noise and sharpness. So as a composition go, very good, great capture, lovely bird, but just few things to think of. Now as post-processing go, let's see, exposure. Yeah, I thought it's a little bit too bright, so I would just go down a little bit with the brightness, maybe add extra contrast. And what else could we do? Maybe just a little bit of extra vibrance. And then on this one, double check your white balance, because I see some green coming into the feathers of the bird. So by pushing a little bit of the tint, I think that helped us. And then maybe in effects, just a little bit of minus vignette to again add more attention towards the bird. All in all, Ken, thank you so much. Lovely captures, obviously two very interesting birds, and well done. So just think of maybe trying to send me a bigger images so we can see if it's where really the noise is coming from. Anyway, folks, thank you very much for joining me today. If you want to join us for one of the future episodes, all you need to do is to join our membership, Clever Photographer Plus, and you can find out all about it on our website, cleverphotographer.com. Anyways, stay safe, take care, and I can't wait to see you again next week.